This version of the Hitachi Zaxis 1000K demolition machine has been commissioned by Heavy Transport Models in the colours of Kibag, the Swiss company. It comes in the standard Hitachi branded box, and inside there are a couple of polystyrene trays and a simple instruction sheet which describes the assembly of the model. When you take off the lid, it looks like this is the invisible version of the model, except that this part of the packaging is not used for the smaller version of the machine. The rest of the packaging is factory sealed, so when you cut the tape you can lift it off and see that the model is wrapped in some soft paper. And there are a few pieces to it. There's the main body of the machine, there's the boom section complete with the crusher at the end, and that makes up the two main parts of the model. And the only other parts which are left in the box are some counterweight blocks which come in their own little packaging, and there's a bag which contains some pins and some spare track links. There's just one piece of packaging to remove from the model, which is a little bit unusual because it's just some cling film type material on the crawler tracks. To assemble the model, the first thing we'll do is to put the ballast blocks into the rear of the body. And to do that we'll use the Australian method, which is to turn the ballast and the machine upside down and then push the blocks up into the body, and that's easier than trying to drop the blocks into place. Attaching the boom is a very straightforward mechanical connection. First off, just raise the boom butt up a bit, and then the boom can be dropped into place where it actually hooks into position first. Once it's more or less in place, there are a couple of steel pins to use just to make a good strong connection, and they just push in quite easily. Once it's all pinned up, the last thing to do is to fit the hydraulics. There's a bank of rubber hoses on top which fit into place. That's a little bit fiddly, but you can get it. And then there's a couple that fit in on the sides as well. Looking underneath, the track pads are pretty good, and there's also detailing in the casting on the bottom of the body. The track frames are good, and there's some fine detailing on the drive sprockets. The cab windscreen has got strong guards, and there are also lights and mirrors. The glass has got a blue tint to match the rest of the colour scheme, and there's a good detailed interior. The body has got panels detailed within the casting, and there are metal handrails at the rear. There are big grills on the side, although the paint finish on the review model wasn't quite so good on the rear ones, which gives it a kind of weathered appearance. However, the graphics are very sharp, and they include a realistic Kibag fleet number. Up on top there are some interesting details and textures with metal grab rails and hydraulic hoses. The very good hydraulics continue on the boom, and the friction rivets used are small and unobtrusive. The Okada crusher is a very nicely made and detailed part of the model. Here's one of the CranesEtcTV team measuring up the jaws to see if the gap is big enough to hold his tool. It's time to put the Hitachi out onto the test track, and there's too much friction for them to roll on a smooth surface, but they roll nicely enough by hand, and the tension's maintained by spring-loaded idlers. If we put the model onto some rough terrain, then the tracks will roll, but they roll better in one direction than the other. In terms of the rotation of the machine, it works well enough, and you can rotate it fairly smoothly, and there's no rocking at all in the mechanism. Moving on to the demolition end of things, the engineering of the boom, the arm and the crusher is very good. There's a full range of movement of all the parts controlled by hydraulic cylinders, and the cylinders are stiff enough so they can hold any pose that you want to set. The model can be stretched out to reach ahead, and in that configuration it's perfectly stable as long as the ballast weights are installed. And as well as reaching up high, it will also fold into a closed configuration. The functionality of the Okada crusher is also good. It's not removable, but it rotates fully. And the jaws can also be opened and closed, although they were very stiff on the review model. And it's an interesting challenge to see if you can fold it up one-handed. There's another feature on the model, which is the opening doorway, which gives access to the centre of the machine, and that provides some different posing possibilities. Another feature that's not mentioned in the instructions is that the track frames are removable, and that's easily done by just undoing a pair of screws. Once that's done, the track frame just pulls away, and then you can use it as a separate transport load. The track frames are very nicely made parts. They've got working rollers on the top frame and also inside on the bottom, although they're hard to see. And overall they're a good quality piece. With the track frames removed, the stabilisers fixed to the bottom of the body can come into play, and you can lower the pads by unscrewing them. The beams also rotate, so it's possible to pose the machine just standing on its pads. With the machine in pieces, that gives the opportunity to display it in a different way. And if you've got some appropriate trucks, you can load them up, firstly with the main body of the machine, although it would normally be on some supports rather than on the pads. You can also add the boom and the track pads on separate vehicles. But with the machine made up, let's make a 12-second diorama. This shows that with some models in the same colour scheme and just a few props, it's easy to quickly make an interesting display. This Hitachi Demolition Excavator looks very good in the colours of Kibag, and both the functionality and detailing of the model are to a very high standard. For anybody interested in big demolition machines, it's an outstanding model.